Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be back, whatever our new normal is. Today's lesson is going to be for Tuesday, April 14th. And guys, we're getting into some really good stuff here. I have some pictures. Don't worry, you won't be escaping the pictures. I drew some out for you, and it's getting good. It's getting really tense. The Cold War is heating up. All right, so yesterday you did expeditions, just kind of like ease our way back in, talking about space and why space is so important and why are we involved in a space race in the first place. You have a bell ringer today, basically still talking about the space race. Why is that even a thing, and why do we care? It's space. We have bigger problems on Earth, and it has to do with nuclear weapons. So answer that bell ringer question. And today we are doing three slides, two writing slides, and then one picture slide. So let's go ahead and start with that. So the last slide you did, and the last slide that we have talked about, was the United States space program. I looked at those nice little pictures. And the moon rock. And JFK's speech about, we will send a man to the moon and get him safely back to Earth. That's a big promise. And no one's ever done that before. Like putting a man on the moon, that's intense. So, NASA's established and we start planning on how to do that. What is it like up there? Okay, that was all the things that we need to discuss, and that was also in the last video that we did. So that is space. That is still going to happen throughout the duration of the Cold War as well. On this slide, though, this is slide number 15. We already did this. There is a slight mention of the Bay of Pigs. Well, the Bay of Pigs, that is what we're going to talk about today. So slide 16, this is where we're at today. It's just titled Cuba. Vocab word would just be Fidel Castro, and that is Fidel Castro right here. Right there, that's Fidel Castro. He has, I don't even want to say. He has some brothers, two brothers, I don't know. And they have been the dictators of Cuba for a long time. So since Fidel would be the first one. During the Cold War, the United States, and we've talked about this too, would back up certain leaders in certain countries as long as that leader wasn't a communist. So this person might be terrible, but as long as they're not a communist, then the United States is going to support them in the election. So we have Fidel Castro, and we have a man named Batista, and the United States supports him in leading Cuba. We don't support Fidel Castro because he's a radical, and he's really close with the Soviet Union, and we don't support that relationship, obviously. It is 1960, and there is a presidential election. 1960 is when John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or JFK, was elected as president of the United States. So his predecessor was Eisenhower. And Eisenhower had just discovered that the CIA had been planning an invasion into Cuba. Again, because we don't like what's happening in Cuba. We don't want Fidel Castro to take over. So being the United States, we get involved. Now, we in the CIA and with part of the United States have planned this invasion, and eventually the invasion is going to be called the Bay of Pigs. And Eisenhower said, let's do it. Just keep going. We need to invade. The CIA is taken over. They'll handle this and make sure that it goes really well. During this time, we haven't invaded yet, but during this time, we start to see that Fidel Castro is gaining some ground, and he is scaring us in the United States. Remember, Cuba is very close. It is, if you are in Florida, Key West, which is like right below Florida. Like if this is Florida, Key West is like right below Florida. It's 90 miles until you reach Cuba. It is very close, and that is foreshadowing. Okay, Cuba is very close to us. And if they were to fall to a communist dictator that close to us, that's like we're going to catch the cold of communism, and that is something that we cannot have. So we start to hear his anti-American speeches and how he wants to take down Batista, who is the person that we support, and we don't condone that. That can't happen. So years of fighting, Batista actually flees the country. He realizes that Fidel Castro has too much support, and he has no proper way to continue. I mean, safe way to continue. He realizes that he's going to lose. So he flees the country, and Fidel Castro declares victory, and he says, okay, I'm going to promise to restore your rights and freedoms. If you're a leader and you have to, first off, make that promise, it's like, oh, well, I mean, we kind of had them before. Granted, it's not like the United States. No state or no country has like the rights and freedoms that we have because of our Constitution. You can have similar ones, but not to an extent of ours. And, a leader says, I'll give you your rights and freedoms. That should be a warning. Like, oh God, he's mentioning our rights and freedoms, and he's a dictator, and he's friends with the Soviet Union. What if he takes them away? So this is just not good. So it's 1960 now, and we still have this plan to invade Cuba, and Fidel Castro has just taken over as the dictator of Cuba. Eisenhower, before he leaves, because there's an election in 1960, but the new president takes over in January of the next year, so 1961. Before Eisenhower leaves, he cuts off ties, economic ties and political ties with Cuba. Basically, we just cut them off completely. And actually, our relationship has been cut off with Cuba ever since, I'm pretty sure it was Obama who ended the sanctions on Cuba. So we really had a tough relationship ever since the 1960s with Cuba. And they became independent from us because we took them over. They became independent from us in 1902. So anyway, things are tense in Cuba. We're going to invade pretty soon, and we have a new president. So that takes us to the Bay of Pigs. Next slide. Bay of Pigs invasion. That is the vocab word for this slide. So the CIA has been planning this. They are confident that it will go well. Well, the new president, he talked to his advisors, and JFK, he was a military man. He was aware of military strategies and things, but he was told by the CIA that this would not fail. He was told that it would be 100% guaranteed that the United States would invade, and we would basically win, and there would be no one there to stop us. Well, he said, all right, let's go then. His advisors were like, oh, well, I don't really know, but the CIA came in and said, we got this. Great, let's continue. We need to take Fidel Castro down. The Bay of Pigs was terrible. It did not work. The New York Times actually released a report a week before the invasion that said that the United States was planning this invasion. And you might be saying oh, well, why would you do that? Everyone was saying that at the time. So again, like I just mentioned about our rights here in the United States, the First Amendment guarantees your freedom of speech, but it also has in there press as well. And the press can write what they want to write. However, if they receive information from the government, from the White House, from Congress, and they are told by the person that they're receiving information from that this might be a national security threat or it might harm our national security if you write this, then they aren't to write it, and they will hold back and they will wait. Maybe they weren't told that this was a national security threat. Maybe they just chose to ignore it. I'm not sure. I truly don't know why the New York Times released this report that, hey, maybe the United States is potentially, I don't know, probably soon going to attack or invade Cuba. Not good. JFK denied it in public. He said, what? This is ridiculous. We don't have a plan to invade Cuba. That's not true. So we still go ahead with the invasion. And when we arrive, Castro and his forces are waiting for us. 1,200 of our soldiers, of the people who had trained for this, they are captured and put into prison. And the invasion fails. It's awful. Castro and JFK end up negotiating for the release of the soldiers, and Kennedy paid $52 million worth of food and medical supplies to Cuba. So instead of invading this, dictatorship to stop the spread of communism, we end up paying them in food and medical supplies, which is what we've been doing to other countries, like in the Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine, to stop them from falling to communism. And now we are paying food and medical supplies worth $52 million worth of that stuff to a dictatorship whom we are trying to take down. This is like the biggest failure of JFK's presidency, and it was right away. Right away. He just took over, just became president, was told that this would work, and it failed. It's embarrassing. And for this new president, who, by the way, was young, he was Catholic, which we didn't, it was the first time that we've had like a Catholic president in the White House. And for him being so young and inexperienced, it didn't put a lot of confidence in American citizens whatsoever. So that last bullet point right there, instead of eliminating the threat of communism so close to the United States, the Bay of Pigs incident strengthened Castro's ties to the Soviet Union. Soviet leader at the time, his name was Nikita Khrushchev, which we'll talk about more. He welcomed the closer relationship between the two, foreshadowing things are going to get much worse in Cuba. So much worse. Where between Khrushchev and Castro, we have the Soviet Union pairing up with a country that is so close to us. That is scary. That is very scary. So for JFK to just be, hello, I'm president now. And the Kennedys have been in politics for a very long time, kind of like the Roosevelts. Like Roosevelts have been in government for forever, and the Kennedys have also been in government forever. JFK's grandson, great grandson, is in the state government, I think as a senator or a House of Representative for Massachusetts right now, not in the federal government, but the state government. So the Kennedys are all over the place in government. But this was a big failure for him, for sure. So I have some pictures here. We have our Cuban exiles, meaning the people that were kicked out of Cuba, but they ended up training to invade Cuba, were working for the CIA. They are captured and taken to prison. This is obviously the United States. That's Cuba. It's 90 miles. It's so close. And for a dictator to take over, like I said, that's very scary. This is JFK and his speech. U.S.-backed invasion fails. 1961. Remember, he's elected in 1960, but he takes over in January, so this is his first failure, was the Bay of Pigs. And we have Castro and his soldiers. I want to show you the picture that I drew for you all. Look how nice this is. Okay, so we have the USA right here. We have the CIA on their ships, just making their way down to Cuba. Then the New York Times releases their article saying that we're going to invade, maybe potentially, I don't know, I think we're going to invade. Kennedy denies it, but Cuba's ready for us. Pretend there's soldiers right here. And the CIA comes to invade. And the New York Times releases their article, it says gasp. And this says down here, Castro and Khrushchev, they're saying yay, because we captured all these people. And Kennedy had to pay Cuba in food and medical supplies, and it failed. It failed. And things are going to get so much worse in Cuba because we have Nikita Khrushchev in the Soviet Union working with Fidel Castro in Cuba against the United States. It's getting closer to us. Communism and dictators. It's not good. It's not good. This picture is going to evolve, and more countries are going to be added to it. So I'll have a little flip book of just pictures of the Cold War. All right. So don't forget to make a summary for those slides. And don't forget your ball ringer. All right. See you guys.